Out, record. All right. And again, for the people that are in class, thank you so much for being here. Happy Friday. Beautiful Friday, right? Last couple of weeks, we had a little bit of coldness and a little bit of rain. And now we have such a beautiful day like summer. So thanks for being here. We're going to dive into today's topic, which is the listing agreement and how to navigate once you execute a listing agreement, the input into the CRMLS, right? The MLS. Now, there's a lot of components, and I wanted to kind of dive deep into how it utilizes your position. It's a very exciting opportunity, right? When you get the listing and the sellers are in agreement, you now have the agreement signed and executed, and now you're going through the motions of implementing it into the MLS. So when you go on a listing appointment, the number one goal is obviously to secure the listing or at least provide the value, right? So I prospect. I've already done my comparable market analysis. My mental mentality is where it needs to be. And the number one thing that I'm thinking is got to get the listing signed, got to get the listing signed, right? And so you go through the motions, right? You go, you introduce yourself, you go and physically look at the property. You ask the sellers, hey, I like to see it from the perspective of a buyer. Let me take a look at the home. So you go through all of the elements, right? You go into each of the bedrooms, you go into the kitchen, the bathrooms, get a gauge, get a feel for it. And then you ask the sellers, where can we, sit down to discuss, helping you sell the property, right? They'll say we can sit in the kitchen table. You say it, they're in front of you. You're here. You're ready mentally, ready to, provide the value on why you got your license in the first place, right? Then you go through the motions of explaining what you're going to do to help them sell their property, right? And it's really simple. At the end of the day, it's very simple, right? Once you can provide the value to the seller, is then the next step is having them sign an agreement, right? The goal is obviously for them to sign the agreement that same day instead of waiting, right? And making a warm lead to a potential hot lead becomes cold lead because you gave them that time, right? So when it comes to navigating the conversation is you want to position yourself to give all of the value so there is no objections whatsoever because you addressed everything that provides them with the understanding on how the process of selling a home is, right? And it's one simple component that a lot of agents unfortunately miss. Remember, it's apples to apples, meaning when you're analyzing a property is you're basing things that are available, under contract, pending, and sold, right? And the parameter is, usually it's about a 1 mile radius from the subject property. And it's a comparable property, right? A comparable property is something of equal feel for it, right? And that kind of gives you a trajectory of what the opinion of value, right? Because at the end of the day, it's an opinion of value, right? I can get three real estate agents to evaluate the home, and guess what's going to happen? Three different opinions of values are going to come. They're not going to be exact and precise, right? It's also the same thing with an appraiser, right? You send an appraiser out there, you're going to get three different opinions of value, and it's what it is, right? Our number one goal in focus is to be able to sell the property, right? In essence, is putting the property where it needs to sell, okay? Not where the seller believes it needs to sell, right? Is we are in the industry to push the deal to get to the finish line to close the deal, right? Think of it as this, right? Have you ever done a yard sale? Yeah, right. You probably done a yard sale. You know what a yard sale is, right? A yard sale is people are looking for bargains, right? And you got to gauge that, right? Because let's say that you're hosting a yard sale, but you have something unique, right? That it's worth a lot of money, right? So in essence, you're not just going to give it away, right? You're going to sell it for prime or premium, right? But then let's say that you have stuff that you just want to get rid of, right? Because need to clean the house or clean up the clutter, right? And you just want things out, right? So you can use the extra income, right? But you don't want that back in the garage or back in the home. You want to get rid of it. Then you sell it at a discount, right? Or you sell it as something that is good for the consumer and good for you, right? That's the good in negotiating and ultimately selling, products, right? Well, real estate is no different as well, right? Depending on the condition of the home will dictate how fast or how slow the property will sell. But it also will dictate in how you put the price on the home, right? Because all sellers, right? All sellers believe that their home is worth $10 million, right? Real estate agents believe that the home is actually worth $5 million. But the consumer, the buyers, may think of the home of being $3 million, right? At the end of the day, it's not what the seller, it's not what the agent, it's what the buyer is willing to pay for the home, right? And it's supply and demand as well, right? Because it depends on the location will dictate if you're going to get a lot of offers or no offers as well. So I want to position yourself in order to understand the elements of the geographical area and neighborhood. And there's a lot of elements to it. How close in proximity are you to certain things, right? Schools, shopping, transportation, freeway, right? Work, right? All of these elements will give a perspective view of what property will be worth, right? Essence is you got to look at the trends as well. As you do more and more CMAs, and the more and more you get familiar with it, it's going to come back systematically, right? That when you're farming a neighborhood and you're farming it on a regular basis, you're going to get a feel and a sense, right? So when an address is brought to your attention, give me the specifics to the property. Well, it's a 3 bedroom, 2 bath home, 1,500 square feet on a 75 lot size in this particular street. You're going to get an idea is because you've done a lot of research. Then when they talk to you, it says, well, based on that, I haven't seen the property. It's around anywhere from 800 to 875 price point, right? And you'll see that there's a lot of real estate agents that are really concise and get good gauge price points because they know the area, right? We haven't physically looked at the property. We don't know what upgrades the seller has done, if any, right? Or the property is still dated from 1980s, right? All of that will dictate how you navigate the conversation and more so how you navigate the price point, right? The actual listing price, right? Because our goal here is to list properties, sell them, and move on to the next one, right? And you'll see on the MLS that there's a lot of properties that sit on the market for a very long time. One is maybe the price is unrealistic for the area. Okay. Maybe the condition of the home doesn't meet the price point, right? Because everyone, including sellers, are going to want a good deal on a property, right? They want to have that sense that they got a great deal, right? It's like dealing at the car dealership, right? You want to get the bells and whistle of a vehicle, but you also want to get a great deal as well. Well, that's a consumer's point of view. And that's also the same thing when it comes to real estate as well, is how do you position yourself to really give the value is your job and your duty and your responsibility at the end of the day. Meaning is this is why we have all of these platforms that gives us the upper advantage to really give a gauge. And again, as I mentioned earlier, it's an opinion. It's an opinion of value. It's not necessarily um, set in stone, right? Because even top performers, may have to do price adjustments. Okay. And a typical real estate professional will look at different angles when it comes to the property, meaning they'll do a history check. A listing appointment when you're preparing for it has to be where you're you're having a comparable market analysis, right? A CMA. That CMA will give the consumer, the sellers, a trajectory or an idea of a suggestion of a price. And it's just a suggestion, right? Because the seller may feel that their home is this, you may feel that the home is this, but there's ways to compromise and we can meet in the middle, right? Or you can go with the position says, look, Mr. and Mrs. Sellers, I get it. We can test the market, put it at this price. But if we don't get any bites or any hooks or any offers, then we must do a price reduction, right? And you want to have that conversation before you even have the listing executed, right? Because you're trying to set the expectations, right? You don't want to be that agent that the seller controls the narrative. And now you have 60 days, 90 days, and the property didn't sell. And then now it becomes an expired, or the seller decides to cancel because they just see that the property is not selling. And guess what happens? Okay. They blame it on the agent. Okay. They'll say, well, it was the agent that was not able to sell. Well, how can I sell property when you're trying to sell it for 300,000 more than what the area's, providing, right? So you got to look at all angles and how you approach the conversation with the seller, right? And data and factual information doesn't lie, right? Black and white doesn't lie. When you provide the seller with the understanding that numbers don't lie, there's no way that the seller can use that as an objection handler, because this is straight out of data that we're able to pull from the tools that we use, right? Meaning is that, I'm not just trying to spit a price because I think your house is pretty. I'm using data in order for me to make a decision of what I feel we can sell this property, right? Because they're relying on your expertise to know how to market the property, how to negotiate, get the property into escrow, and ultimately get the deal closed, right? So that way your clients can move on to their next chapter of their lives, right? Because we're not in the babysitting business. We're in the business of selling homes. So in essence is, once you understand the ins and outs and how to articulate the conversation with the seller, it's easy, right? Everything is all systematic. Everything is a system, right? And when you follow a system from A through Z, it's going to be repeated. Any listing that you go, any listing appointment that you go, it's going to be the same thing. Here's the fact, right? Agents are the misconception, I guess is the word I want to use, is that a $500,000 price point is going to be different than a $5 million price point. And the answer is no, it's the same thing. Because if you go on a $500,000 listing appointment and you go on a million listing appointment, the process is going to be the same. The conversation is going to be the same. The paperwork is going to be the same, but just the level of conversations may be a little different. When you get to a category of higher end properties, they're going to expect more than someone that's selling a property for 500,000. They're not going to expect much. They're going to say, just help us sell our home. But someone that is selling a $5 million home or more, they're going to expect marketing, videos. They want it to showcase as the only property in the area that's selling, right? Because their expectations demand it. So for us real estate professionals, the key element is get excited, right? Because the beautiful thing is there's no difference when it comes to a lower end listing to a higher end listing. It's the same thing. Now, again, if you don't feel 100% confident, take someone with you. Take someone that you feel has the ability, maybe know the area, and learn from one of the best. I've done that many, many, many times where I tell agents, look, find that person that you feel comfortable with, pitch it to them, and say something like this. Hey, I have a listing appointment in the next couple of days. I know you do a lot of business in this area, and I would love for you to be able to go with me on this appointment. Who's going to say no to that, right? Because there's an opportunity. Agents that perform at a very high level, they have an ego. meaning that they love negotiating, they love presenting, and they're good at it. So it's okay. It's okay to work with someone who's going to help you get the listing. Don't be that agent that believes that I need to take all of this and I want to do it all by myself. Because what's going to happen is you probably will not get the listing. Remember, there has to be a concise approach, but it's not about you at the end of the day. It's about being a good listener and seeing the needs and wants of your sellers. When you're in front of them, sitting down, ready to present your listing presentation on why they should choose you as the right agent, you should already understand that there's three objections when it comes to a seller asking you questions. Okay, I've said it in the past, and I will continue saying it, that the three objections is price, terms, and conditions. Price, terms, and condition. When you're able to handle any of those objections on the price, right? The terms of the condition, then it makes it a whole lot easier for you to be able to answer their objections with no issues, no hiccups, right? Now, in my personal professional opinion, if you can address it right off the bat and do a game plan, then they're not going to have any objections. They're just going to say, where do I sign? And that's what we all want is, right, is an executed agreement in place that the seller is saying, where do I need to sign, right? But it takes practice, it takes momentum, it takes, you understanding the initial process, because once you get to that level, then it's exciting to go on listing appointments. So let's see, mention appraisal to was an escrow appraisal that said was worth 750. Yeah, exactly, right? Even appraisals, you'll be surprised that, may also not know the area. And I've seen appraisals kill deals because their appraisal was too low or the appraisal was too high, right? Now, the essence is, our job is to also navigate this because they're giving you the opportunity to list a home. You're going to market it. You're going to do open houses. You're going to farm the neighborhood. You're going to invite the neighbors to come and maybe do like a twilight or maybe 1 hour before you do and host your open house because you want to get as many eyes on the property. But all of that, okay, and I'll repeat this, all of that can go to the side if the property is not listed correctly, not priced correctly, right? So our job is to be able to anchor that conversation and make sure that the seller understands, you're in the business to help them sell their homes and not in the business to hold and babysit the home, right? Because that happens quite often with a lot of agents is because they let the seller dictate what they believe their home is worth. Okay. Now, I also want to be brutally honest with you. Okay. Sometimes it may not be worth taking on the listing. Now, I'll get a lot of questions and I'll get a lot of people saying they disagree with me, and I'm okay with that, right? I'm okay with people that disagree. That's the beautiful thing about, navigating conversations, right? Some will say, I'll take the listing regardless if it's overpriced, because the goal for me is to try to get buyer leads from it. Buyers will come to the open house. Buyers will call up on my signs. Buyers will see my social media information on third-party websites. So there's an opportunity for me to get buyers, even though that I know that the property is high. That's their view of it. And I respect that. Like I said, there's no right or wrong to this. I just have a different point of view because I don't want to waste people's time. I don't want to be that agent that lists his properties high and never sells, because they're going to know this is the agent that lists this high and ultimately the deal either expires or gets canceled. You want to be the agent that gets the listing and closes and your production goes up, right? So I'm okay to say three things to the seller. I'm okay to really be brutally honest with the seller and says, look, at the end of my presentation, three things are going to happen. I either take the listing, you give me the opportunity to list your home, or we both decide that maybe we're not meant for this, right? I will not want to take the listing. And I'm okay with that. Because again, I want to be honest with a seller is my goal is to sell the property. And if we cannot see eye to eye for me, and this is just me talking, folks, I'd rather not take the listing. I'm okay with that. Right? Let someone else deal with the cost, the time, and the energy. And then you're going to see that property get expired or get canceled. Okay. It may take three agents that the seller will go through to eventually see it where now it's priced where it needs to sell. And hopefully by that time, you're already having a conversation again with the seller. As I see that you listed it with two other agents and it hasn't sold. Let's do the right thing, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Let's list the property where it will sell and get traction. So that way I can help you on your next part of your chapter, right? So the beautiful thing is the agreement, and I'm gonna navigate the listing agreement real quick, okay? Because there's a lot of information on here that I need you to understand. So everyone on Zoom, do you see the listing agreement? Is that a yes?
Good morning, Simon. No, it's just the first page of the zip forms.
Okay, let me try one more time. Thank you. Um, that's the problem when you're back and forth with it. So let's see now. All right. Do you see it now?
Yes, for sure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. So this is your standard residential listing agreement. You see that it says an exclusive right, authorized right to sell. This is the most secure agreement that you can have when it comes to having the seller sign. What this means is basically whoever brings a buyer, you're still entitled to compensation. If the seller brings, if another agent brings, if a consumer just happens to walk and reach out to the seller and says, hey, I like your property, I'd like to make an offer directly with you. Guess what? If you have an exclusive authorization right to sell, you're still entitled to compensation. Now, bear in mind, you have to have an agreement in place, right? This is why the terms and conditions are important. Now, it's pretty self explanatory. The date of preparation means when did you prepare this agreement? The exclusive right to sell, it says, that the seller is giving you the authorization to sell. The broker is the brokerage. Okay. You're going to put the brokerage that you're currently with. And you're going to also put in the property address, the city, the county, and the parcel number. Okay. The APN number is like the social security to our personal entity. This is how it identifies this particular property based on the APN. Okay. You may have the address all different, but as long as the parcel, then that's how they will identify the property. So it's crucial and important that you double check, triple check, and make sure that the address meets the parcel number, right? Because we've seen incidents in the past where escrow and title uh, fail to see that, and it compromises the transaction and may delay the property. Now, the important thing, just like the purchase agreement, is the grid, okay, under section 2, which is the terms of the agreement, okay? This really lays out everything to the seller of what your duties and responsibilities, but it also gives a clear, concise understanding of what the process will be when it comes to the property. Now, the listing period is the beginning date that the property goes live on the market. So if the property is not going to go live anytime soon, you want to put a future date on there. For example, You go on today, Friday, to go on the listing appointment. They say, yes, we want to list with you, but we don't want to start marketing because we need to clean. We need to get a professional photographer out there. I want to do video footage and drone, whatever the case may be. Give us a week. No problem. Then a week from today, whatever that day is, let's say it's March 7th, as an example, you're going to put March 7th as the beginning date. And then the expiration date means the future date that you're securing. Now, standard practice, and this is standard practice for most agents that I've seen in my almost 30 years, is 6 months. Okay. That's typical. Okay. Can you do more? Yes. Can you do less? Yes. But the standard should always be 6 months, right? Because if they say, I'll only give you 2 months, right, that might not be enough time for you to do what you need to do. Because the likelihood is that what if you do open escrow, but the buyer then gets cold feet, decides to cancel, right? Well, the time is ticking. Doesn't matter if the buyer is in escrow or not and it cancels. You only have 60 days to get this property in and out before it becomes an expired listing. So give yourself that opportunity to showcase. And if that's an objection, is Simon, I only want to give you 90 days. How do you handle that conversation? Very simple. Look, I appreciate that. And, thank you for the opportunity. But let me tell you why it's going to be very hard, right? We don't know who your new buyer is. We don't know how soon we're going to get an offer once the property hits the market. There's negotiations involved, right? There's due diligence for the buyer. And then part of that due diligence, the buyer may ask for requests of repairs, and we may go through another phase of negotiations, meaning, Mr. Seller, there's negotiations in the beginning, there's negotiations in the middle, and guess what? There's negotiations also even close to the end. We may have to negotiate terms. So if this property does fall out of escrow, we're back to square one. We may be halfway or even 30 days in. Now that's 6 months, right? Or excuse me, that 90 days is now 60 days for me. And what if the property goes into escrow a second time and it falls out of escrow again? Now the pressure is on me that I just don't want to be, right? I need the time and the necessary avenue to help you sell this home. This is why I'm asking Mr. and Mrs. Seller a minimum of 6 months. Now, if we sell it in 30 days, that's it. It's done. We're good to go. But I also want to set the expectation is in all of my listings, my average is anywhere from 40 to possibly 60 days before it actually sells, right? Because there's a lot of variables, there's a lot of moving parts. Yes, I would love to get a buyer immediately that hits all of the bullet points of what you're looking for on price, terms, and conditions. That's my job to negotiate it, but I don't have that magic wand, that crystal ball that's going to tell me here's the future buyer, right? So we rely on heavy marketing, a proactive approach that I'm out there actively engaging in conversations with the consumers that I just got a brand new listings that I'm showcasing. It's a beautiful 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 1,500 square feet on a 7,500, built in 1955. The homeowner about 2 years ago did all of the renovations and updated the home with permits on it. They did the kitchen, the bathroom, the floors, the windows. And it's priced to sell, right? So when you're really giving the value to the consumer, meaning the sellers, they're going to appreciate you more and realize, okay, now I get it, because they don't know what they don't know. They think that we have that magic wand that says, bam, property is sold. No, there's a lot of things behind the scenes that we do as real estate professionals to arm ourselves to showcase the property, right? Now, real estate sells itself at the end. It's not you that sells the property. If the property is desirable or the consumer sees that of an opportunity, they're going to buy with or without you, right? You're just happen to be in the forefront of that because you're the listing agent, right? So the essence, it's important to always ask for a minimum of a 6 month listing, right? And you gauge it, right? You ultimately gauge it. Now, even though They say, I cannot give you but 90 days. Okay. I respect that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Let's do this. If you allow me to represent you on the sale of your beautiful home, and I allow the 90-day listing period, right? If during the process, we're navigating and a deal falls out of escrow, we're getting close to that 90 days. Can you at least give me the opportunity to have a conversation about possibly extending the listing for another 30 or 60 days? I'm okay with that, right? That at least gives you kind of a understanding in a way that you're coming across authentic. Meaning, look, I'm going to do my very best to try to sell it in 90 days, but in case I don't, it falls out of escrow and we're trying to find, by that time, they're going to feel the trust in you. They're going to feel that, you're going above and beyond doing anything necessary to sell the property. So I cannot see someone not giving you the extension of the listing agreement for another couple more months. So that's another approach that I would navigate if you need to go in that direction. Section 282 goes into the price, right? This is the golden ticket here. This is what ultimately will dictate if the property is going to sell. Now, if the property is here in the city of Torrance and the property's here on the north side, the south side, it's a different price point than the west side, the east side, and the north side, right? Even though, hey, Simon, it's Torrance. Don't you think the city of Torrance prices should be pretty much equal? No. Each neighborhood, each zip code, each grid has a different view and position. The most desirable area to a lot of the consumers is more the south side and the west side, right? Because you're closer to the coastal, you're closer to the beaches, and also the desirable school too, as well, right? People want to move to the south side because of the South High School, right? So there's many reasons why people buy, right? So it's our job to understand the local market and local area to determine what listing price to put, right? So that's where you put the amount that the seller agrees. B goes into specific listings, okay? What type of property are we selling, right? If you're selling anything other than a single family residence, duplex, triplex, fourplex, manufactured home, here you're going to check off that it is a manufactured home. If it's part of a probate, conservatorship, or guardianship, then you're going to also check that, right? But if it's a standard listing, then you leave those two blanks. Section C goes into all of the changes that transpired about 2 years ago in 2024 in August, where they eliminated broker buyer compensation. Back in the day, if you've been in the industry, we were able to negotiate terms for not just our commission, but for the cooperating broker as well, meaning the buyer agent that brought us a ready, willing, and able buyer. Well, those times have changed dramatically throughout the years, and because of the big NAR lawsuit, they've removed compensation to the buyer agent. Therefore, this is an agreement between you and the listing, you and the seller, meaning whatever you negotiate is based on you obtaining the listing. Okay. Standard has been, and I see it still today, is 3%, 2.5%, or 3%, 2.5%, or 2% is what I see right now as the norm. Again, this is what you earn when you sell successfully the property. Okay. Nowhere here does it talk about any compensation to the buyer agent that brings you an offer. Okay. And we'll go into that a little later on how that works. Okay. That's the wrong time, by the way. All right. So the next talks about C1 is the compensation to the seller's broker. Seller means the seller's agent, okay, which is you, the listing agent. I know it may be a little confusing. You think seller, well, seller, ooh, okay. No, it's the listing aspect of it. There's a percentage and there's also a flat fee that you can put there as well, right? Most agents prefer to do the percentages because you usually get a percentage of the purchase price. As an example, if you do $1 million price, right, at 3% is $30,000. That's a good day. Okay. If it's 2.5% or 2%, that's still a good day. Or you can do a flat fee, right? Meaning it doesn't necessarily have to be a percentage, it can be a flat fee. Okay. That's where that information goes. You can also attach a broker created compensation schedule, meaning if there's some other type of terms that you want to include, is that, hey, you know what? If I if I get you this price, I'll get paid this. If I get you that price, I'll get this. If I get you that other price, then you provide me with this type of compensation. Is that most agents don't. They keep it very clean and very simple. Don't overcomplicate it, but it does have that option. Section 2 is very important as well. Okay. What I mean by is that Section 2 navigates is that a compensation is paid by the seller for a buyer who is unrepresented. What does that mean? Okay. You just said earlier, Simon, that no buyer's agent is being compensated. Well, that's not the case on here. Okay. This is a situation where in the beginning there was a lot of confusion. Okay. And the confusion was, is this the sector or the section by clicking here and putting, 2.5% is what the buyer's agent is going to collect? And the answer is no. So don't think that by putting that, that means that the seller is giving the additional 2.5% to the buyer's agent. What this statement says is this additional compensation on top of what they're already paying you up here, right? And let's just say that it's 3%. This is an additional amount from the 3%. So in total, it's what?
5.5.
5.5, 5.5%. This additional compensation is to the seller's broker if the buyer is unrepresented. And it says seller's broker. Okay. It says seller's broker and seller's broker here. So meaning this is for you. This is not for the buyer's agent. This is additional income for you who is representing a non-represented buyer. Meaning for the additional work and time that you're going to navigate and negotiate, you're entitled to additional income on the approval of the seller. That's what it means. Okay. That means that by doing extra work to, not that you're representing the buyer, but you're doing additional paperwork, the seller is granting an additional compensation to do so. This is nothing to do with the buyer's fee, because if you think that 3 and 2, okay, is that portion to the buyer's agent, and now the buyer agent submits an offer, and under that sector, it says they want 2.5%. What this means is that, the 3% that you're getting, right? The 2.5% that the buyer's agent is receiving, right? Is the amount. You're not entitled to the 2.5%. So don't think that it's 3 plus 2.5 plus 2.5. No, that eliminates that section, because this is only if the buyer is being unrepresented. Okay. So I want to be crystal clear in that language, right? And you can also put a flat fee too. Okay. It's your discretion. Commissions are all negotiable. They're not fixed by law, meaning, you can negotiate whatever you feel you're worth, but also the seller has to agree to it. It's not that just because you put it, they say yes to it. They may argue and says, no, I'm not willing to give you 2.5, but I'll give you, just 1% extra. Okay. And if you're okay with it, then that's good. That puts you at 4% total commission, right? Just in case you do end up representing a buyer who doesn't want to be represented. Does that make sense? All right. Section C talks about the continual right to compensate broker for identified prospecting buyers. Okay. This is a safety clause. Okay. And I want to be clear in how this safety clause works, because I think it's important and vital. This safety clause is an amount that you're going to put in case the listing expires or gets canceled. Expired or gets canceled. I typically put 120 days. I don't know why, but that's something that I've been doing all my career. Okay, that's 4 months. You can put more, you can put less. Okay, But you have to explain it to the seller what this means is because if you don't explain it, it's going to come back to haunt you. So let me give it to you very clear. Now, the beautiful thing about all of these agreements, ladies and gentlemen, is that there is a paragraph sector. So if a question comes up from the consumer, well, what does this exactly mean? That's a great question, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. Let me take you to the paragraph where it explains it a little bit better, right? Now, it's going to take time for you to memorize, and I already have it of how to explain it. But if you don't know, it's okay. All you have to go is to paragraph 4, D as in David, subsection 2. That's going to give you the answer, right? And we'll go there in a minute. Okay. The next sector, section C4, is the seller's obligation to pay previous broker. Okay. This is for those situations where, let's just say, you ended up picking up a listing as an expire. You're calling expires, and you happen to get the listing from an expired. Okay. I'll give you an example. Ring, ring. Hi, is this Mr. John Smith? Yes, it is. Hi, my name is Simon. I'm a local real estate professional. I noticed that the property came on the market as an expired listing, and I was just wondering if you're in the position to interview agents. We took it off the market, or the listing agent wasn't able to sell it. Whatever excuses they say, right? The goal for us is to get an appointment. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you allow me at least 20 minutes of your time, I can show you how I sell more homes. I specialize in expires, and I'll explain to you why I believe your home didn't sell. Can we set an appointment? It's only going to take about 20 minutes. Now, you and I know that 20 minutes is not going to happen. All you're trying to do is get your foot in, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. They want to feel that you're not going to waste their time. So in those conversations, make it of urgency. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I only need 20 minutes of your time to explain how I work. Once you're there, it's going to be at least 40 to an hour. That's the hook. But you don't say that you're going to spend an hour with them. You just says, I only need 20 minutes of your time. That's a doable amount of time. Okay. And this is how agents get more and more expired listings. That section is that now you have the expire and they're giving you the opportunity to list the home, right? They're responsible if this number up here meets. See that 120? So meaning is they will tell you is I'm the seller. I'm telling myself, look, we'll give you the opportunity to list our home, but I also want to put that, this brokerage and this list of buyers, if they come back and buy this property, I am not entitled to pay you compensation. But if any of those people do not buy the property, then I'm willing to pay compensation. That's what that continuous period is. It basically gives the previous agent 4 months of an opportunity that if that listing agent that had it prior had any offers, showcase the property, provided information to a consumer, and now they come back and buy it with a new listing and a new agent involved, then the previous agent is still entitled to compensation. And if you put that language in there, then the seller doesn't have to pay 2 commissions. They will only pay the first agent. Yummy.
And to us, but it's strawberry day.
We're doing a strawberry day over here, so I am going to get one because I love strawberries. Sorry.
Uh-oh.
Sorry for the people on Zoom, but that's
why they should come in person.
This is what we're offering here at the office if you're here at the Torrance office. All right, so going back to our position is that the continuance is a protection not just for the previous agent, but it also protects the seller from any additional compensation due, right? So by disclosing that to the new listing agent, what happens is it protects the seller from paying double commissions. Now, if the seller doesn't provide you with any list or any information, then you're golden. Then you don't have to worry. They're still responsible to pay you commission. Okay. Broker is paying a referral fee related to the representation of a seller. Okay. This is the new document that if you check this, it's going to provide you with the referral agreement. Why is this information on the listing agreement? Okay. The reason it's on here now, okay, because this is the newest updated form that came in on December of 2025. They've added section C5. What this means is now we have to fully disclose that if we're referring your client to another agent and you're getting paid a referral fee, the seller needs to be aware of that terms and condition. Now, this is only, and I want to make sure you're clear, this is only if you are going to refer your client after the successful closing, meaning you have a license and authorization to sell real estate in the state of California. Yes or yes? Okay. Now, what it is, but let's say that your clients are moving out of state. Let's say they're moving out to Nevada, Arizona, Texas, Florida, Georgia, wherever, anywhere anywhere in the states, right? Alaska, Canada. You have the ability to make an additional compensation for referring your clients to another agent from a different state that you're not licensed. Okay. So you get compensated by finding and identifying an agent. With all of the changes that happened in 2024, they missed this part because we were still doing negotiation dealings on commissions. So the state of California, the Department of Real Estate, and I believe it was, I don't know if it was the Attorney General or if it was the FBI, they realized, wait a minute, we totally forgot about referrals. Referrals are still being negotiated between agent to agent, and we're not fully disclosing to the consumer that agent A and agent B negotiated a compensation that agent B is going to give to agent A for referring their clients to agent B. Okay. So that's where this form comes into play. This is where fully transparency comes into play, that now the consumer knows, oh, okay, Simon referred me to agent in Florida, and agent in Florida is going to give me a 25% referral fee. I see that. Okay, I'm golden, right? It's only full transparency. Okay. It's section C5.
Oh, on the RPA.
Yeah, this is the listing agreement.
Oh, listening. Okay.
This is the listing agreement. If you check that, only if you know that your clients are moving out of state, then you're going to check this. If your clients are not going to move out of state and you're going to represent them on the next purchase, right, then you don't need to check this because you're going to be the agent listing the home, but you're also going to be the agent finding them a home as well. Then there's no need for you to check C5.
So where do you put the amount of commission referral percent?
Okay, we'll get to that. So when you check that, it populates car form RAD, better known as RAD. Okay.
Oh.
So that's where you're going to put all of the information and how and who is going to be referral. That's, just like your typical referral agreement. I'm referring it to a KW agent in Florida as an example. Terms and all that fun stuff. Now a seller becomes a buyer because now they're buying a place. They sold their home in California, relocating to Florida, and that agent is going to help them find a property, close the deal, and then they pay you a compensation. So this form is clearly just fully transparency that the seller / new buyer now knows that you're going to get some compensation for referring them out to another agent. Okay.
And to the buyer, it doesn't make any difference because if they pay, they still pay the same amount. It just the agent gets less.
Correct. Yeah. All right. Section D goes into extended to be included or excluded from the agreement. This is where you're having the conversation with the seller. Says, Mr. Sellers, what are you including with the property? What are you not including with the property? This is where you can now put all of the information. And if there's a lot more, you can add in a supplement addendum that reflects, we're going to leave all of the furniture. We're not going to take anything. We're downsizing. All of the stuff is not going to fit in our new home. Or the seller just wants to start a new slate clean and do so. I'll give you an example. When I moved out of my previous home and moved into my new home, my newer home was a lot bigger. My old home was a lot smaller. So I decided to just leave everything to the tenants because I eventually rented out the place. I just allowed the tenants to have the furniture there, which wasn't a lot, but we left a lot, if that makes sense. And that's okay. Sometimes, the sellers just don't want to take the additional stuff. They just want to take their clothes and move on. They're going to get brand new everything. And that's okay. But you want to make sure you document anything so there's no misunderstanding and confusion, right? Because now the buyer sees that they believe it's going to stay. And now they exchange keys and they go into the property and realize, hey, what happened to that item? I thought it was going to stay, right? Oh, no, that wasn't going to stay. That's why you want fully clearance of what is staying and what is not staying, but also it's your reinsurance. Mr. Seller, you told me on the listing agreement that this was staying and you took it. You signed and agreed to it, so you need to bring it back or replace it. But the buyer may not be happy with a replacement because they bought the place because that's specific, right? So it can be a little bit complicated.
Now, if you leave a fridge, but there's no warranty on the fridge, how do you word that so the seller knows, yes, they're buying the property with the fridge, but the fridge, inspection comes and the fridge is not working, is not the seller's
Well,
responsibility.
that's where a home inspection is done.
Right.
A good home inspector is going to evaluate and check. They're going to open up the fridge. They're going to check the temperature. They're going to look at the freezer. And they're going to put that as their report. At the time of inspection, the refrigerator was working properly.
Listed on here that fridge comes with the house. And the inspector comes and says, oh, like the freezer part of the fridge doesn't work.
Mhm.
How do you handle that part?
Well, simple. I mean, all properties are sold in as condition.
Okay.
So if the refrigerator is staying and now the home inspector says, hey, this thing is not working, well, the buyer can do a couple of things. The buyer can submit a request of repairs to get that fixed before we close. The buyer can request credit in lieu of the repair, meaning just give us the money, we'll replace the refrigerator. Or the buyer can just take the refrigerator as is because they're getting a great deal on the property. They're going to eventually get their own refrigerator.
I know, but my point is, seller is giving it for free, and he doesn't want to be responsible if it's not working or if it's working or whatever it is. Where do you put that?
Yeah, well, you do that as part of your counter offers, right? So when you as a seller know that the fridge is not working properly, but you're selling the refrigerator or giving the refrigerator as part of the incentive, you want to make sure you document that by saying to the buyer, hey, we're leaving the refrigerator, but this doesn't work. Okay. So you're fully disclosing to the buyer is, yeah, it's not working. You're buying it with the bad refrigerator at your own discretion and risk. And that's it.
Okay.
If the buyer signs off on it, they cannot come back and say, well, the refrigerator is not working. What the seller told you, here's the form as part of the disclosure. Remember, you got the TDS, the SPQ in there says, Mr. Seller, are you aware? Yeah, I'm aware that the refrigerator doesn't work. Okay, because that's part of the seller disclosure to the buyer, right? And the buyer's going to do the due diligence. They're going to say, oh, the fridge is not working. This will give me an opportunity to now put a request of repairs, or you know what? We're going to toss it anyways. We're going to get our own refrigerator. Okay. All right. So that's the section D's that it goes. It's pretty self-explanatory. The next goes into the MLS and public marketing. All right. The property will be marketed. What is your primary MLS, CRMLS, Claw, whatever the case? Any other third party sites like, you can put Zillow, Redfin, whatever the case may be. Also, keep this in mind that when you have a listing agreement populated, it automatically populates the MLSA form, which is this one here, the multiple listing seller addendum. And we'll explain it a little further. E2 goes into the publication of sellers' willingness to consider concessions. Okay, so this is again something that is important and vital when it comes to explaining how the agreement works. If check below, seller authorizes broker to market the seller is willing to consider offering concession. What is concession? It's not broker concession, it's just concessions to the buyer because we cannot say commission to the buyer's agent. This is the reason we got into that big lawsuit. So concessions is concessions to the buyer. However, the buyer wants to utilize that money, it's up to them. They can use that money to pay their broker, agent, use it to pay for requests or repairs. They can use that money to buy down the rate, or they can use that also to pay for closing costs. Okay, so if the seller is willing to, then you're going to check. And the MLS listed above is permitted to do so. And there's a section on the MLS that allows us to say, is the seller willing to give concession? Yes or no, or you can leave it blank. If you leave it blank, it basically still gives the buyer agent an opportunity to submit a request. Okay, a request to help with buyer's closing costs or a request for compensation. If you put no, then basically you're saying that the seller's not. Even if you put requests for compensation, they're going to say, well, on the MLS we said no, so therefore they're going to reiterate that on a counteroffer, no compensation to the buyer's agent. Okay, or any other marketing outside the MLS. Section E says seller instructs broker to not take or use photos in marketing except as required by the MLS rules, right? If that's part of the requirement. Property address. Now we go into the broker and seller duties. Time of presenting. It's really pretty self-explanatory. Seller instructs broker to present all offers received as soon as practical, or if checked, offers shall be presented on. So maybe the seller doesn't want all of them as they come. So if one offer comes in today, another offer comes tomorrow, another offer comes on Sunday, the seller may say, look, I don't want them each and every. Let's put a time date, future time date, that if they're interested in submitting an offer, we're going to have a deadline. And that deadline might be next Tuesday as an example. Then you're going to put that. So that way you have instructions of what the seller's telling you. Hey, you know what? Submit your offers. We're going to entertain and present all offers to the seller on Tuesday, March 3rd, as an example. Okay.
Is it usually standard just present as the offers?
It's pretty standard. Yeah. But sometimes we have particular sellers that don't want to get them on a regular basis. Let's just hold and wait and then present them. So if it's 20 offers on Tuesday, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, here are the 20 offers that came in. Okay. But most don't care. They'll say, as they come, give them. But it also gives you kind of an urgency because if you get an offer, remember those offers are only good for three days, right? And it becomes an expired offer. But if you put a timeline for a future date, then it gives the buyer an understanding. Hey, you're not going to get an answer, so don't even bother to ask. Do you have any updates on this? Did our offer get accepted? Are we going to get a count? No, we're going to present it to the seller on Tuesday. We may not give you a counter or an offer or response, so maybe Wednesday. You see where I'm going with this? Mm-hmm. That's why you have this information. F2 goes into buyer supplement of offer letters. This is, again, if the seller instructs broker not to present buyer letters. Okay, in the past couple of years, it was removed. They didn't want what we call those love letters, right? Submit the offer, the pre-quad, the proof of funds, and then a letter from the buyer saying, we fell in love with your home. Here's a photo of our family with the kids and the dog. We want to get the kids into the school. I know the house is near the park. We hope that you'll consider offer. That was eliminated because it was kind of considered discriminatory, because you're influencing the seller based on photos But also it was also the opposite, because they'll see who you are. They may not decide to go with that as well. So there was reason behind it. So that has been eliminated. Now the timing of presenting offers is where the seller can make a discretion. If they want, perfect. If they don't, perfect. Just give us instructions on what. So here it says that seller instructs broker not to present offers, or if you check, seller instructs broker to present. So you have to check it. If they say, yes, we want those love letters, then check it for compliance, right? And making sure that you and the seller are on the same page. Okay. Section 7, F3 goes into investigation. The beautiful thing is, even before the property goes live on the market, the seller can do their due diligence and get a NHD, a pest control or termite, a general inspection, start working on homeowners, documents, roof, and all that stuff. So the beautiful thing is maybe the seller is proactive and says, look, I want to eliminate any buyer requests of repairs. Let me get my own report so I know what I need to fix, or at least I know that I'm not being taken advantage because we did a thorough inspection ourselves prior to putting it on the market. So it gives you kind of a layer of here, you have that opportunity to do so before we go live on the market. G goes into the exceptions to ownership and title. This is just in case, the property is in a corporation and you just want to make sure you identify or anything that may be added or taken away, especially like on trust. There's sometimes trust that can be very lengthy. So you may want to have this opportunity under G3 to put that information on there. H goes into seller intends to include a contingency to purchase. Okay, so this is again that it's a protection for the seller. Listen, I'm willing to sell my property, but if I cannot find and identify, open escrow, and close on my uplay, then I have the right not to sell it to the buyer that we are in escrow. So if that's the case, because they need the proceeds of the sale of their home, large down payment to put up on their purchase, they may put this as a provision saying, look, I'll sell the property, but if I cannot find a upleg home and negotiate terms and close, then I'm not going to sell the property. Again, that tells the buyer that's buying your listing, says, hey, if they don't find a home, they're going to cancel and there's nothing they can do. They cannot say, I'm going to sue you. No, we disclosed that there was a provision under that form, SPRP. Okay. Next section goes the basic, the seller opting in or opting out, right? So does the seller want a lockbox or a key like the Supra? Does the seller want a sign of open, a for sale sign? Any additional terms, then you will put any additional terms there. Advisories or addendums, again, if it's one of these, then you would check it. Now, I also want to be clear on something that I want to explain when it comes to compensation, okay? Because I get this quite often, and I want to make sure that we all understand how commissions are earned, okay? Under Section D, it says compensation terms. It says compensation is earned on seller shall pay the broker as follow. Okay, this is how you get paid by doing and performing your job, right? It's completing the transaction. Okay, so if you complete the transaction, you're entitled to compensation. You did the work. You're entitled to get paid. Remember, folks, you're not paid on the front, right? It's not like I could say to Farah, I'm willing to sell your home. Okay, I'm charging you 2.5%, and you say, okay, but I want you to pay me now. Okay, you cannot do that. I cannot collect advance commission. I could collect a commission on the successful closing of her home. That's how I get paid, not before. Okay, and if you're caught doing that, you're jeopardizing your real estate license. Okay, more so, the seller may sue you, because they give you the advance money now. You don't sell the property, they give you $30,000. That's a lot of money, So don't be that agent that gets advance commissions, right? It's only on the successful. Let the escrow handle that part. If during the listing period or an extension of the broker and any other broker, seller, or any other person procures a ready, willing, and able buyer who's offered to purchase the property on any price and terms is accepted by the seller. Okay, that's the key, folks. Okay, it has to be accepted. Just because you have a ready, willing, and able buyer doesn't mean you're entitled to compensation. You'll only get paid if you have the seller accept. So the ready, willing, and able, and I get this quite often, Simon, well, I had a buyer that submitted an offer and the seller rejected the offer, and it was a ready, willing, and able buyer. I asked, well, what was the price? Well, the price was 10,000 below asking. I said, okay. And I told him, and I said, look, I want to be brutally honest and crystal clear. If you list the property for $1 million and you get an offer at $1 million, heck, if you get an offer at $1,100,000 and the seller does not accept it, you're not entitled to compensation. Well, Simon, that buyer was a ready, willing, and able. I get it. I understand. Here's the dilemma. The seller did not accept your offer. 20 years ago, I can argue that. 20 years ago, it had language that if an offer came in and the seller did not accept, pay me my commission. That's how it was written in the language. Not no more. Okay, so you got to be very careful that you understand how the contracts work, ladies and gentlemen, because this is now, you're not entitled to compensation. Now, I'm going to go in deeper on here because there is specific language that says that if the seller makes it unmarketable, meaning they're making it hard for you to do your job, then yeah, then we can ultimately negotiate saying, hey, you're not giving me the opportunity to do my job. You're making it very difficult for me to do my job. Then if that's going to be the case, then I'm going to have to get paid my commission. I'm doing everything possible to help you. You're just not giving me the opportunity. So it says, yes.
An example of the seller not giving me opportunity to do the job.
Yeah, exactly. So one is many things. They're not allowing the agent or the buyer to see the property, meaning you have it on the MLS as active, right? And you're getting appointments and you set appointments and the agent calls, hey, the lockbox here, or someone took the key, or they're saying, we need to cancel because the seller's here. That's not helping you sell the property. Because one, it's interfering with your job of showcasing. The buyer's not going to make an offer sight unseen. They need to see what they're getting themselves into, right? But that's one of the scenarios that a seller can be responsible to pay a commission. Let's go into it a little bit more. Providing that the buyer completes the transaction or is preventing from doing so by the seller. Broker is entitled to compensation whether any escrow resulting from such offer closes during or after the expiration of the listing period or any extension. Remember that provision that I said earlier. That continuing right of compensation. If during the continuing period specified in paragraph 2C, and I apologize for I know we're going a little over our time. I promise I'm going to close it out here and then, we'll move on. And if you have any questions as well, folks, you can always reach out to me. At the same period, after a cancellation of this agreement, unless otherwise agreed, seller enters into contract to sell, convey, lease, or otherwise transfer the property to anyone, a prospective buyer, or that person-related entity who had physically entered and was shown the property during the listing period, or any extension by the broker or any broker, or from whom broker or any other broker submitted to seller a signed written offer to acquire, lease, exchange, or obtain any option of the property. Broker right to compensation pursuant to this agreement shall be applied if the prior to expiration, meaning that if if any of these things happen that the seller makes it, right, they have it under their personal name, right? Their title says Mr. and Mrs. John Smith. And because they're trying to not pay you, they now transfer their entity or their name into something else, or they try to transfer to a family member or a child, then you're entitled to compensation. Okay. So that's what it says. Or if they decide to sell it to someone else, under the exclusive right to sell, ladies and gentlemen, it allows the opportunity for you to get paid compensation. Okay. Seller interferes with the listing. If if without broker's prior written consent, the property is withdrawn from sale. If the seller makes it hard to ultimately sell the property from sale, conveyed, lease, rented, otherwise transfer, or made unmarketable by a volunteer act of the seller during the listing period or any extension. Okay. That means that if the seller interferes with that, then we can go after compensation. Okay. That's exactly what that means. Any additional compensation if the buyer breaches and the seller recovers any money. So this is, again, if you are in escrow, the buyer released all contingency, there's a deposit. If the seller is awarded some money, then you get, I believe, equal to or lesser than half of the damage covered. You also can. Now, most agents, and I recommend that you don't, because in good faith, you're going to get a commission regardless, because you're going to get the ability to relist the property and get another buyer in. Okay. All right. With that, I'm going to close it out here. I would say, please do your due diligence. The rest of the stuff is just your do's and don'ts with the buyer, with the seller, with the agent, supplements. It goes into really what the grid we spoke on. The seller will do things in good faith. So it's pretty self-explanatory. But again, if you have any additional questions, you can feel free to reach out to me. With that, any final questions before we close? All right, let me check. All right, so the Southwest Association is having a Zoom class on Monday, March 2nd, 1 o'clock to 3:30 on the RA if anyone wants more training. Robert, thank you very much. Absolutely. Look, the more training, the better for all of you, right? So again, everyone has their different perspective, their different views of it. So yeah, this is the beautiful thing about what we do is we're all here to pour into each other and help navigate these license agreements. So with that, thank you. Have a great Friday, a great weekend, and I will see you on our next contract class. Thanks, everyone.